Today's segment of Mindful Leaders highlights the life of Nadia Gortzounian. Nadia is co-founder and treasurer of Santé Armenie, an organization created in response to the emergencies from the Artsakh War in 2020. Born to an Armenian family in Marseille and raised in Paris, France, Nadia's roots go back to Van, Marsh and Aintab. Her ancestry includes Der Revont, a spiritual leader who was also a freedom fighter in the late 1800s. As a medical graduate, Nadia developed a prosperous leadership career at Merck & Co. in France for almost 30 years. She then devoted herself to serving the community as president of AGBU France and AGBU Europe. Today, we dive into personal topics that help us understand the drive that makes Nadia who she is, such as her inherited values, strengths, purpose, all enabling her to be a conscious and compassionate leader. Nadia Gortzounian, what a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Lara. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
You know, Nadia, I always think that the most important place to start these conversations is getting to know the experiences that help shape the person who they are today, because it creates the context for what we're going to be discussing later on. So tell me a little bit about the younger experiences that you think were so important to you that helped shape you into what or who you are today.
This is old story, Lara.
No, it's not.
I was born in Marseille, and I was in a very loving family, but I've always been a unique child, which is a fact, so I have always lived like that. I still don't know whether it's an opportunity or a pity to be alone.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've always dreamed to imagine what would be having brotherhood. I don't really know, but that's the way it happens. I had very close cousins with whom I grew up, which helped me feel less lonely, but I didn't really suffer about that, I must say. So that's my cool, easy life in Marseille. And then my parents went to Paris. I was still really young, around 6 or 8 years old. And then I continued my life in Paris, still with the same cousins, and made my medical university in Paris.
Well, I also think that, you know, a lot of generationally our historical narratives also impact us in many ways, in large measure. Tell me a little bit about your father, Sunan Gortzounian, as well as Mary Lelikian, your mother. You know, father from originally roots from Van. I think your mother is Marsh and Aintab.
Exactly.
But I'm really curious to know more about Der Revontian, this spiritual fedai or freedom fighter.
You were about him. Interesting. Yeah, thank you. Well, yes, like probably all Armenian families, when you tell the story of your family, it's nearly incredible. Because my father, as you say, was born not in Van. He was born in Yerevan, in fact, but from a Vanity family. Yeah. My mother was born in
Egypt.
Alexandria, Egypt, while her family was from Aintab and Marsh, as you just said. So when you tell that to my French, for example, friends, they are really looking surprised, because when people, you know, used to live, for example, in even Marseille, and the whole family comes from the same way. For the Armenian families, surprisingly, we always have very exotic histories, I would say, with those very different people. So it's interesting because there was kind of a fight between the Arevelsi and Armetsi, the Vanitsi were, I mean, again, born in Yerevan, so from Arevmutk.
And the Marsh and Aintab.
The Marsh and Aintab are very proud Giligiasi family, which felt more educated, and it's different. They didn't even eat the same food.
Right.
So my mother had to learn the Vanitsi food so that she can please my father. Yeah. It's really interesting. But yes, again, I think in all Armenian families, there are a lot of very specific stories. So my mother's grandfather was a kahana. He was
a priest.
A priest. So he was married, he had 12 children, but he was a very fighting priest. I hope I took part of his, character. So he was fighting against Turk. He has been imprisoned several times. He has been, injured, in prison. And at the end of the day, because he was continuing to be kind of a so-called terrorist, he was sent out of the Ottoman Empire. This is why the whole family had to exile to Alexandria. Mm. This is somewhat how the family went to Egypt, and kind of they saved, part of the family was saved from the genocide because they were already in Egypt.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's really destiny.
They were saved, but they also had, I think from the time where Derevontian, your mother's grandfather, I think it was probably near the late 1800s, before the genocide, when there were still massacres.
Yes,
and he would bring military equipment into Zaytun.
Yeah, to Zaytun and so on. Yeah, this is why he was again exiled. We somewhat saved the life of the part of the family. Yeah. By the way, unfortunately, a big part of the family remained in Marsh and Aintab, and they were not, of course, saved. I mean, they were
you grew up with these stories. I mean, there was the memoirs of Derevontian.
Yes.
And what? How do you think that actually brought to life how you were or how you became? Because obviously these were things that were continually fed during your childhood.
Yes, again, of course, I think that all family, are supposed to keep the history, the good and the bad things from the history of the family. Obviously, my mother, for example, she was really proud of this grandfather. And also the whole family from my mother's side, were they quite kind of very religious, obviously, since the grandfather was still a priest, even a fighting priest. So yes, all this impacted, the history. What was really interesting is that I never felt that I was, brainwashed about being Armenian, being proud, being a fighter. It's all, just natural way of life. Probably things that you hear without listening, just conversation maybe of adults without caring about the children, but you just live in this environment, you listen this. And I guess this is because I never felt again to be, pushed, to be brainwashed, to believe this or believe that, or fight for this or fight for that. It was more subtle, I would say.
Yeah.
But it's, I guess it's even more, it goes more on your roots in this way, because you are just living in this mindset, in this area. It's really interesting.
I'm imagining you born in Marseille, growing up in Paris, but also in this environment, this Armenian environment, and I kind of resonate with that story because as a Canadian, French, Armenian, born in Canada, obviously, I had to deal with a dual identity.
Yeah.
This thing of having my society where many were French Canadian or French English, but then in the home or the community, it was always Armenian. At times for me, I remember it was very frustrating because it was too much to bear on my own shoulders growing up. I'm curious to know, how did you deal with it? Many diasporans have this issue. How did you deal with it? How did you embrace the dual identity?
So I do share the feeling of dual personality, I would say. I sincerely, as far as I remember, I don't felt as a pressure or as a negative pressure, I would say. But it's just, again, it was just obvious to me that it was kind of where schizophrenic. I always had kind of two lives. I have the life in the day, I would say, at school with French friends, which we connected with, but not so much, to be true. And then it was back at home, and the weekends, it was more family or Armenian environment. Well, you must notice, I don't know whether it was the same for you, but again, both my father and mother were the first to come to France. I am the first generation born in France. So it's easier for us, I must say. But again, so this is why we definitely live this dual personality, two lives. We never mixed. Surprisingly, I noticed that myself, one day, I was surprising myself, noticing that I am not mixing both friends. The French, I see some French friends, when I was younger, of course, now it's different. But you don't mix the two lives, you know, it's just separated. But just a de facto thing. You have two lives, and you go one from the other. But sincerely, I must say that I never felt some negative impact on this. But it was just, again, a fact.
Yeah.
But I felt it, I agree. Yeah.
You did. You have an insatiable energy. I think of your journey. You went into medical school in Paris, then had this lucrative career in executive positions. You then, after 30 years in being in the same position, you actually then went on to volunteer and be president of AGBU in France, then in Europe, and then you co-founded Santé Armenie with two other doctor professors. I just think, where does this person's drive come from? My goodness, like nonstop, always trying to work for something that is good to help to create value. Where does that come from?
Well, there are many, many people doing what they can to help. For me, it's just natural. But to answer your question, there are two remarks. The first one is, as you say, after nearly 30 years of working, making a career, raising my children, I said, okay, but for what, I felt that I had to give back to my community. As clear as that. So one day I decided, in a few months, that, I have to stop before getting too old to have some energy to give back to my community. This is why I decided to stop to work, because I had a wonderful, very lucky career. I loved what I did. I was in a Merck company, pharmaceutical, from the America. It was fantastic, fantastic work. But at the end of, after 30 years, you say, okay, but what's next? You have to give back to your community, which I could not do really before. I was close to the community. I did one or two things. I even met Monte Melconian years ago, but this is I would say, private story. It was at the time of Assala and so on. This is old story. But I didn't really give enough from my side. So I stopped everything and I became a volunteer. And as you mentioned, I started with AGBU, which is a fantastic organization that does very good all over the world, of course, but mostly in Armenia now, since the last years. And yes, Santé Armenie, I would say, unfortunately, because of the war, we felt that we had to commit to a very serious long-term commitment to act, and try to contribute humbly to improve the medical offer very largely, in Armenia, which we try to do. The second comment that I wanted to say is that I have energy, but my mother always teach me, the love of work. I cannot really stay. My dream is not to go on Bahamas, on the seafront and wait with a book. It's kind of a nice dream, but this is not my objective. I need to try to do something. I like to help. I hope that we are, again, humbly, but kind of efficient. And this is the best reward for us.
The two things that I picked up on, one was Merck, and the other one was related to your mother. I think I want to start with your mother. She raised you to be a very independent and autonomous woman.
Yes. And
I still look at the challenges that exist today for women in leadership positions. What is necessary? Do we all have to have a role model like your mother was? Or are there things that you would propose for people to help, understand what the stigmas are still for women in leadership positions? And what would you recommend to tackle those challenges?
So again, maybe I'm too optimistic, but in my life, I did not really felt the burden of, being a girl. I didn't really felt the limit. Or maybe yes, in the level of salary, I'm sure there is kind of a difference, but it did not really affect me. And I didn't feel this wall glass, that you cannot go further. I am still, I would say as a fighter, I'm always frustrated that I could have been doing more. You cannot be satisfied of what you get. You can always do more. But again, what is obvious for me is that women are the future. We have, of course, to be very confident and proud, very confident on ourselves, and we can move the whole world around. A funny example.
Right.
I used to be in management position for 30 years, nearly, not 30, let's say 25 years. And I noticed that with time, I was more and more, happy when recruiting women, not to make a difference,
right.
because I felt that women were more easy to work with, more reliable, less of an ego, or some people would say less of a testosterone process, coming on the scene. So that, again, I noticed myself as a funny, detail that with time, I worked more and more with women. And again, it was not by a philosophy or for, making a positive difference. And personally, by the way, I don't like really the concept of preference, choosing a woman because she's a woman, right. Instead of choosing, I always fight to choose people on their capabilities. But it's just a surprise to me, it was a surprise to me to see that with time I was more and more recruiting women because I was more happy with the result. And again, reliability, confidence, seriousness, hard workers, maybe more than boys. So it happens that I became kind of feminist, but against my will. I mean, it's just a fact. And, I noticed that after the math.
Right.
Interesting.
Very interesting. Well, I mean, feminism is basically the terminology that says that there's equality between men and women. It's not preference.
This is what, first of all, it's not, I hate this idea. There is no fight against. It's all together. We are complementary. We have to move together, and I believe in that. But again, what I want to say is that I was not on the principle a feminist, fighting for giving more access to women and things. But with years, with the time of experience, I noticed those kind of things. Right. So with time, I'm becoming kind of a feminist. But again, I still value very much, your capabilities, your commitment, more than the sex or the history or anything else.
Right. Well, you mentioned your 30 plus years at Merck and Co. Merck and Co. being one of the top multinational pharmaceutical companies in the world. And I can't help but think of the former president, Kenneth Frazier. I mean, I know his story. Kenneth Frazier was the first Black African American president of Merck & Co. And for me, why it was so special is because his grandfather was born into slavery, and his father was a janitor. And yet he was infamous for having spoken out, especially during the Trump's Manufacturing Council and the issues that took place in Charlottesville. He was infamous for speaking out against intolerance and bigotry. And I can't help but connect, where does a person's values and their drives come from? It could be because of their upbringing. You, having been at Merck for such a long time, and what lessons would you give, or what input or insight would you give to other leaders or organizations on how to build an environment that is really conducive to good value and creating that kind of value?
So, different comments here. First of all, I was very lucky to know Ken Frazier. He was a managing director for several years while I was at Merck. And he was really an impressive man, very smart, but very calm, with a big aura, really very impacting. And it's really good when you work in a company and you have this kind of model, because this is part of the commitment that you have towards the company. So really, I was, again, lucky to work in this company during his activities.
Yeah.
Coming back to leadership, again, my vision of leadership is really very simple if I want to summarize. I think that leadership is all about making the other grow, the other develop, you know. You have to, for me, I'm happy when I see that I have been able to a little bit help someone on this and that process to be a little bit better, feel more comfortable in the job, be more happy about their achievements and so on. For me, leadership really is being at the service of the other people and try to help them grow. This is why I'm so committed, even at HBU, to some programs that develop leadership about people. For me, it's all about values. And again, what are values? Again, it's work, sincerity, genuinity, you know, being honest, being a hard worker, being happy to share, team worker, and so on. It's so important.
Yeah.
And again, what was really rewarding for me at Merck was that I felt so happy and comfortable in this environment. It was kind of a big family, but not on the negative part of, you know, paternalism, that as we say in French. No, it was that there were values that we were sharing. We used to say that we are not selling drugs. We were trying to save lives. It's just a big difference.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think, you know, it's hard to see people staying in a company for more than 5 years, let alone 30 or 35 years. So I assume that the environment, the culture, the values really make a huge difference, regardless of, you know, just the salary or the financial contributions. And
I know that now generation, of course, is different. I know that now, you know, the young ones are much more flexible. The market is different, and I accept that. I understand. In my time, it was more longer period, but still, I used to say, this was probably not smart to tell at Merck, but I used to say that I would never change the company to make the same job for 10% more money. What is important is that I am happy with the value that I share, and that some company could pay more, but that don't have the same values. So that was my very clear choice. This is why I remained there. And I was happy from day one to the last day, I can tell you.
Beautiful. I want to talk about confidence. We live in a culture, especially when you think about Instagram, where we see people who looks like they're chasing their dreams, you know, and they have the most confidence because that's what social media shows us. Yet we don't hear the whispers of their self-doubts. How does one really build that kind of confidence in a genuine way? And were there any self-doubts that you have, or limiting beliefs that you've had that you've learned to address?
How can I answer this question when I'm not self-confident myself? Can I?
Yeah, of course. I mean, but it's something that I'm sure you've been working on.
This is a work of every day.
Yeah.
This is probably something that, whether we like it or not, age helps, because one day after the other, you get a little bit more used to it, and you work a little bit more on it. It's obvious to say that many people that look very confident usually have a very big failures behind the scene. So I don't know. I think, again, there is here a difference of, generation. I cannot really talk for the young one like you or even younger. But no, self-confidence is, again, it's a work of every day on yourself. This is what makes you grow, in fact. I was saying that we have to make people grow as a leader, but you have to work on yourself too. And working on self-confidence probably is the most difficult thing and the most important thing to do. This was at least the case for me. But I don't know, it's interesting.
Well, thanks for the honesty. I want to be able to ask more, but I want to just follow up with one last question, and that's related to your vision of what Armenia could potentially look like in the next 5-10 years. You were here during the 2020 war. You kept coming and going to France to bring help and support, which also gave birth to Santé Arménie. You come often to Armenia from France. You visit. You're working constantly with the staff here. What is your impression and your vision? I mean, it's always a very difficult question to answer. I just want to get a sense and a feel as to, people who have lost hope. What do you say, or what do you tell them?
This is a very difficult question. And again, I don't feel I am allowed to even give my opinion because it's not valuable. It's just personal feeling. But I would try to answer kind of with a pirouette. I mean, saying that my hope and my belief is that I see here every time that I know so many wonderful people, so many young ladies like you, Lara, but many others. I'm really positively surprised. So this is what makes me confident. Because if we do something, we will do with the people. If we do something, we will do that with smart people. If we do something, we will do with the young ladies, smart, who are, making Armenia. When I say Armenia, I always mean Armenia and Artsakh, because I am also convinced that we will go back someday. I used to say, I don't know when and how, but we will go back there too. But no, Armenia will survive, but will only survive thanks to the young women and also young men who contribute to the development of this country. Yeah. This is what makes me positive and optimistic. We have no way to think differently. And again, my motto is we do, every single of us should do the best of what he can in his capabilities. And we work, we don't really think, we move on, we continue to go straight in front of us. And if everybody works, again, in their competencies, very hard, I'm sure that the end will be good. We are here for 3,000 years. We will be here still in 3,000 more years.
Yeah. Amen. Nadia Gortzounian. We've had a chance to have several conversations before, and every time I always think this woman is just incredible. The power, the energy, power in terms of the beautiful sense. You have so much drive and your intention to really do good, to serve, all the qualities a leader should have. And I really appreciate the way you've continued to work. You say you stopped working after Merck, but you're still working. The one difference is that you are doing it, voluntarily, but it's still a full-time job. And I only, wish that there were more people like you as role models to help us really pave the way and lead forward for both men and women together.
Yes, and there are many here and in the diaspora, many people that want to contribute and can contribute a lot. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Nadia. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.